Good morning, I hope you're having an absolutely fantastic day. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I made a video called 3 film scores that changed my life. If you haven't seen that already, there'll be a link to it up there. I knew before I even made it that it would be really difficult to pick just 3 because I've been listening to film scores for years and years and years. And while I was filming the video, I had moments of thinking, oh shit, I should have mentioned this film score and this film score because they were not more impactful, but equally impactful. And I thought about refilming it and all of that, but I decided that I'd just make this video because I can't really pick just 3. So this video is going to be about 3 more film scores that changed my life, but I will leave it at that. I won't have another one later on. So the first one is a score that I don't think people would guess necessarily would be included on this list, but there's a kind of story behind it. But it's the music for the film The Day After Tomorrow, composed by Harold Closer, or Closer, I don't know. The Day After Tomorrow as a film, despite the negative reviews that it got, will always have a special place in my heart, primarily because of the impact that its music had on me. Now, when I was at school, there was a library, as there usually tends to be in most schools. Our library, I discovered in secondary school, had a DVD section, and this was really exciting for me because even at a young age I loved films, and I can remember when I turned 12 in school I was obviously allowed to borrow the DVDs that were of a 12 certificate. And I don't know what this is like in other countries. In the UK, DVD ratings are U for universal, so it's like everyone. PG, just parental guidance, which kind of just means what it says. There's no legal limit to it. 12, 15 and 18, which is self-explanatory. When I turned 12, I could then take the 12 rated DVDs out, and I took out The Day After Tomorrow because it had a really cool cover, and I wanted to watch New York City get hit by a tidal wave. Obviously, I was 12. But I can remember taking this film out, going home, putting it on for the first time, and just being blown away in the first couple of minutes by the music. Just the music, because if you've seen The Day After Tomorrow, it opens with a long shot of, the ice caps, or somewhere that's very icy, but just a very long shot as the opening credits are happening, and the theme from The Day After Tomorrow is played, and it's played beautifully on strings, and then, horns and brass come in to start playing it, and it's so good. And I can just remember thinking when I was watching it, I love this film already, and I wasn't necessarily old enough to appreciate that the reason for that is just because I love the music so much, but it just was awesome and beautiful as well. And I think that it's in this day and age, especially with superhero films and Transformers, like all of these big action blockbusters and disaster films, they've all got music, but The Day After Tomorrow I always felt was a little bit of an exception because it had the dramatic action music, but it also had some really beautiful stuff in there. There was legitimate emotion packed into that score, and it was wonderful. And I think until I was probably about 15 years old at school, at least once every couple of months, I would borrow The Day After Tomorrow. Like if there was a Friday and I knew that I wanted to have a film night by myself, I'd go to the library at lunchtime and get The Day After Tomorrow out if I wanted it to be like a special Friday. And I would be absolutely furious if someone had already taken it out. I would just be livid. So yeah, Harold Closer's score for The Day After Tomorrow is just brilliant. The second score in this list is another one by Thomas Newman, but it's a score of his that I feel doesn't get as much credit or recognition as it maybe deserves. It's his score for the film Meet Joe Black. Meet Joe Black is a cinematic masterpiece. It's charming, it's funny, it's heart-wrenching, it's dramatic. It's got Anthony Hopkins in it, it's got Brad Pitt in it, and his blonde hair in that is just, I wish I had hair like that sometimes. But anyway, it's a brilliant film. I love it. I know that not everyone does, that's fine, whatever. I absolutely love it. It makes me cry almost every time I watch it. And as is always the case with most films that give you an emotional reaction, the music is probably 40% of it at least. And I really do feel like the score for that film is one of Thomas Newman's greatest compositions, and he always composes very good music. It doesn't really include any of the electronic elements that you get in his scores for films like American Beauty, and it's just got some of the most beautiful movie themes ever in it. There are loads of them, and it's so Thomas Newman. Thomas Newman has such a distinctive sound, and I feel like if you want to hear a textbook example of Thomas Newman's sound, listen to the Meet Joe Black soundtrack. But it's absolutely beautiful. And then the last piece of music, That Next Place, I think is what it's called, it's long as well. It's a long piece of music because it's a very long film. It's like 3 hours or something, but I love that. It's just such a good score. I can listen to that music any time of year, any day of the week, and I will always just love it and engage with it and really focus on it. And I can remember realizing that the very first time I watched it, I can't remember exactly how old I was, but I watched it with my sister for the first time, and I think I was probably 15, 16 maybe. I would have seen The Shawshank Redemption, so I would have known of Thomas Newman as a composer, but this just really brought it home how good he was and how great of a score that is. And it carries so many examples of really good and effective film scoring as well, just in terms of things like obvious repeated melodies and leitmotifs that come back. It's It's wonderful. The third score in this list is probably what I should have included as the first one last week, because this is the film score that had the biggest impact on me. It's partly what made me want to write music for film, and that is the score for M. Night Shyamalan's film The Village by James Newton Howard. Now, the film is something that I used to absolutely love. I still love it from a sort of sentimental perspective. I'm aware of a lot more that's wrong with it as a film than I was when I first watched it, but I think it's one of the best film scores ever written in history, genuinely. I don't know how that score flew under the radar. I don't know how James Newton Howard didn't get an Oscar, at least nomination for it, because not only is it absolutely exquisitely beautiful, but it's also interesting and different, because it's very different to what you'd expect an M. Night Shyamalan score to sound like. It's just beautiful and it's wonderful and it's really well written and it's got interesting instrumentation. There's the violinist Hilary Hahn, I think it is, who plays this kind of solo violin part throughout various of the pieces. Her playing is wonderful and it's just like raw emotion. It's so good. It is so good. I can remember the first time I watched The Village, it was like one of the first horror films I'd ever seen. I watched it at one of my old friends' houses, and I can remember, like, you know when you're younger and you first see a horror film and it affects you in a way that no horror film does as an adult? You would actually feel terror. Like, you would be watching something on screen and something would happen and you'd feel like a horrible, like, gut rush of fear. It would, like, legitimately affect you and you actually couldn't sleep and all of this stuff. Like, those were the days, weren't they? Anyway, The Village terrified me the very first time I saw it, until it finished, and then I kind of was just like, actually, this is just lovely. And the music is just out of this world. I think I've said this before, but I would pay a lot of money to get a copy of that score on vinyl. I don't think it's ever been pressed, but if it were to be pressed, I would buy it in a heartbeat. And I always loved the music. When I first saw the film, I knew that the music was great, but it took, I think, a couple of years for me to appreciate it on the level that I now do, because I can remember watching on YouTube some documentary about Tuomas Holopainen, the keyboard player and sort of primary songwriter for the band Nightwish, who are my favourite band. And he was talking in this documentary about the hard time he'd had after they had to fire their previous singer, and that The Village was like the film that helped him through all of that. And I can remember as like an impressionable like 13, 14-year-old watching a video about basically the person who was my idol, I was then like, yeah, The Village is like such a crucial film. And he also said in this documentary that the soundtrack was one of the most beautiful film scores ever written. I, at the time, agreed, but I always sort of in the back of my mind was expecting me to at some point grow out of that mindset, but I never have. Like, even now watching the film and noticing all of the flaws in the film, the music just sets it apart. In my opinion, the music is what stops that film from being like a bad film. And I know that some people absolutely hate it, and there are probably lots of good reasons for that, but the music is just so good. I can remember when I was younger printing off like illegally downloaded sheet music PDFs of how to play the track The Gravel Road from that score. That score I will listen to till I die, I reckon. So there you have it. Those are 3 more film scores that changed my life. And I'd love to hear what music had a profound effect on you when you were growing up. And it doesn't have to be like film score music, just anything that was significant and went towards shaping who you are today. It's fascinating learning these things. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in hearing any of my own music, there are links in the description to my latest instrumental singles, as well as links to my Spotify page. I'm releasing a new instrumental single every 3 weeks until the end of December at the moment, so be sure to follow me on Spotify so it can be added to your release radars and whatnot. There'll also be links to the digital and vinyl release for my EP, Her, and my latest instrumental single, Here's My Heart, is coming out in 1 week, so there will be a pre-save link down there in the description for you to click if you wanted to pre-save that on Spotify and digital platforms and all of that stuff. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely fantastic day, and I will see you very soon.